Welcome back to The Gaze. I'm Enrique, and this is my show, Talk for More. I am happy to meet you on a digital platform of a new future Europe, a space where we'll find and highlight all of the most significant events in the region for you, and we'll speak about it with the best of experts. Today, we will speak about the safety of Europe, stocks of military equipment in different countries, and of course, supply of weapons and ammunition for Ukrainian counteroffensive. And I'm so very glad to give you today's guest, Israeli military expert, Mr. David Handelman. Hello, David.
Hello.
How are you today?
Fine, how are you?
Perfectly well. Let me talk you through my first question. The main result of the NATO summit is a set of adopted decisions, public statements, and all the initiatives shows clearly that Ukraine's transit in alliance succession has actually begun. This is the process that gains more and more signs of irreversibility, as it was stated by the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, Alexei Reznikov. The value of the NATO summit can be highlighted in three parts of achievements that are worth detailing. The first part is the content of the events as such, the achievement of consensus and a deep understanding of common goals, the background of which is the Ukrainian position. The second thing is those formal decisions and its political and legal features. The third part, I would name the results of fieldwork, so-called, during the summit. So my question to you, David, out of all the decisions and initiatives of the NATO summit, which one would you have titled as a most important thing during this summit?
First of all, there are two parallel processes. So the one is Ukraine-Russia war, as is going on now, and decisions that NATO has to make about himself in the future. What we see is, plainly speaking, coming back of the Cold War with big armies, big military expenditure, and in plain words, all the world now is back to arming himself. We see all over the world countries buying weapons in milliards, billions of dollars. So we also see NATO plans to put 300,000 soldiers in the future on the alert state. So basically we see back to the Cold War with large armies and so on. All the other details, just outcomes of this one big decision, one big resolution.
Right. So is it good? Is it bad? Maybe you have to propose any? What do you suggest? I know you understand that it was like a kind of negative tone that you said. We're going back to big, larger armies and all that Soviet era and blah 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 and so on. But as an expert, what would you suggest?
I don't say it as a good thing or bad thing. It's just a fact. So we have to deal with facts. Many people are starting Fukuyama and after him thought that era of big wars in Europe, at least, is now over. We can almost disarm ourselves, as we saw in many European countries. Now we see that these predictions were wrong. The era of big wars, it's not gone, it's present. So everyone will have to make decisions according to that. It's just a fact. It's not... we can speak from some moral or historical, but practically it's just a fact. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a fact that everyone has to deal with it.
Okay. Okay, I'll take absolutely as an answer. The very fact of another fact is the appearance of the G7 declaration proves that the issue of a just peace in Ukraine is of global interest, wrote Reznikov. This is another Ukrainian thesis that has gained international support. Russia's attack on Ukraine is not a local problem and does not have a local solution, therefore, in the form of freeze or pause or similar halting approach. There is only one way out of this war: the defeat of the aggressor. The crime has been perpetrated, so the punishment must follow. So if I say that this is a common goal for all countries of G7, would you agree to that, David? Would you agree that all countries want Russia to be punished for this aggression?
The hard part is that defeat and punishment may be seen in many different ways. I'm sure that Ukrainian victory, as Ukrainians see it, and as West countries, especially USA, see it, it's very different things. That's the main reason why NATO doesn't want to participate in the war. It just only helps Ukraine to fight its own war. So defeat and punishment, it's pretty vague words. I don't agree that every Western allies see eye to eye with Ukraine on that subject. Maybe they don't want Russia to win, but defeat of Russia and punishment of Russia, it's very different.
Yeah, all right. What I meant when I was talking about Russia is actually the Putin's regime, the Kremlin's regime now. This is what I mean. Because maybe Russia will change. I personally don't believe that, but maybe. Let's give them a chance. What then? This is like a sub-question. A new Russia. Would new Russia have to pay for the sins of the old Russia, of the Kremlin's regime, of the Putin's atrocities and hostilities here in Ukraine?
But the question is how we get to new Russia. What will happen to old Russia? Military defeat or some military coup, or just death of Putin, disintegration of Russia's state? This is very different ways. So now we don't see any new Russia tomorrow. So we have to think: is the new Russia even possible in the nearest future? And if it is, what is the way that can lead to it? But ideally speaking, everybody would like a new, different Russia, democratic Russia. But the tough question is how we get there.
Exactly. This is one of the toughest questions, I believe, and even for Russians themselves. So let us talk for more on the current situation on the battlefield in general and Ukrainian counteroffensive in particular.
Ukraine is continuing its critical counteroffensive.
Et de la contre-offensive qui est menée par l'Ukraine.
To run a counteroffensive.
Ukrainian counteroffensive is far from a failure, even though it is progressing more slowly than planned, stated the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States, General Mark Milley. The main problem causing Ukrainian casualties right now is minefields, not Russian aircraft, said Milley. Alexander Syrskyi, in an interview with BBC, admitted that now, in more than a month since it started, Ukraine's long-awaited offensive on multiple fronts is going slower than many had hoped. He says in the east, just like the south, the area is saturated with mines and defensive barriers. The Russians have many strongholds, therefore our advances are really not going as fast as we all would like, Syrskyi added. So, David, please educate me, as an expert, what is slow and what is fast in terms of Ukrainian counteroffensive? And what is it then? Is it slow, or is it fast, or is it enough? Or maybe you know the way how to make it faster?
Ukrainian offense going slow, not just because of the minefields, because of all the defense that Russia built in the past half a year. First of all, we must say that Russians learned the lessons from the Kharkov breakthrough in the last year. The main thing that they did, they doubled their forces in Ukraine, and now they have something like 400,000 men, that twice as they had last year. Secondly, they built echelonized defense from one edge to another in the south. And only after that, also means like minefields, strong points, all of this is covered with artillery and air force. But the main reason that Ukrainian offensive not going
As
fast as they would like is two main factors. Russian troops endure under fire, and the stability of Russian command and control chains. Two of these factors were lost by the Russians in last year Kharkov offensive. Now they are performing much better on these two factors, and that is what holding the Ukrainian offensive, because the minefield is just stopping the coming troops. After that, after they stop, the Russians attack them with artillery, air force, and their own counter attacks. So Ukrainians suffer losses. They have to retreat and try again and again on the same tracks and on the same fields. That's the reason that's going slow. But on the information available right now, almost all the Russian reserves already engaged or in the battle themselves or in the line of defense. Ukrainians, on the other hand, still have, at least theoretically, enough reserves to slow grind the Russian defense line. But the problem is it's the theoretical numbers maybe have enough. But we will see who will crack first. If Ukrainian forces crack, the offensive will stop dead. And if Russian will crack, we will see the breakthrough of Russian lines and movement of Ukrainian forces south to the Azov Sea. We have to see and wait who will crack first.
So this is why the army commanders, the military command of Ukraine, the authorities of the country, they keep on talking about those aircraft, F-16s, the fighter jets. Why they need it? Can you explain? Obviously they need it, but can you explain why?
Offensive, especially when we talk about strategic offensive of large dimensions, usually have to go with air superiority. Now, who has air superiority is Russians. Also, they have artillery superiority. In this kind of thing, it makes Ukrainian offensive very difficult, but we have to ask Ukrainian command, they know all these details before they started the offensive, so at least they thought that even without the plans, the offensive is more or less possible. Of course, with F-16s in a large quantity, it will be much easier, but the fact is that Ukrainian command started this offense without it. That means they thought they have a chance even without the plan.
Yeah, I also think so. I think Mr. Zaluzny and his headquarters know what they're doing. I just wanted to understand, how can you start the counteroffensive without air superiority? But you probably can, obviously. My next question, pardon me, if you have anything to add, please go ahead, but I was going to move right to my...
Possible, but it's much more hard, and that is the reason. But I want to once more say that if Ukrainian commands ordered the offensive, they thought they have a chance even without the plans. But we have to bear this in mind.
Yeah, and the world, he's helping actually, because Ukraine has gained at the Vilnius summit this. From the United States came 31 155mm howitzers, 32 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, and 32 strike armored personnel carriers, 28 million rounds of small firearms. A large number. It is not reported exactly how large for the purposes of secrecy. However, land-launched hand-launched missiles, grenades, Stingers and Javelins, as well as drones and quite an impressive amount of transport equipment, Germany is transferring 25 Leopard tanks, 2 Patriot complexes, 1 lunar UAV system, other weapons and equipment including tens and thousands of rounds of heavy ammunition. Great Britain, Australia, Norway, Czech Republic, France, Canada and Slovakia will give no less. Among the transferred are helicopters, shells, vehicles, weapons including cluster munitions, NASAMS systems and control centers for them. So, David, don't get me wrong, person, or anything, no ingratitude. However, is it really help from the world and from Ukraine, or is just, an obsolete military equipment that people need to get rid of?
If we look at this war, the main lessons that this war taught us that there is almost no such thing as obsolete equipment. We see Ukrainians and Russians use not only new but all the tanks, all the vehicles and all the weapons. So Ukrainians now agree to accept even tanks from 60s and maybe even 50s and so on. There is no such thing as obsolete weapons. The game is on quantities, not qualities. That another lesson. Before this war, there were many military theorists thought that quality is the main thing, but we see in the big war, it's a game of numbers. What they need, it's quantities. One main disadvantage they have artillery shells. It's a very simple thing, but they simply don't have it enough. West transferred to Ukraine something like 2 million artillery shells. That they need much more. That is what one of the reasons that are stopping them now. They don't have not only cannons. They simply don't have enough shells. That simple thing. They simply don't have enough of it.
And how much do you think the shells should be sufficient for Ukrainian counteroffensive to give me a better momentum, or to come faster and easier and to lose less lives?
The problem is Western countries, as of now, just it's physically impossible for them to provide all the needed quantities. Ukraine needs at least twice more, but now it's impossible. When we look at programs of military industries around the world, maybe the production will meet the demands mainly maybe in 2025, but not now. USA, if it would be their own war, they would use their own stock, but now they can spare all of it because they have to look over the shoulder to possible war with China. They simply cannot transfer all the ammunition to Ukraine, but we already saw that they are unpacking their stocks in Israel and South Korea to transfer many hundreds, thousands of shells to Ukraine. But for such a big war, it's simply not enough, and it won't be enough in the nearest months or maybe even in the nearest years, because in the last 30 years, the West simply did not prepare himself for such a big war. Now it's not the 80s when the European countries and the USA had huge armies and plenty of stocks. Now it's all much smaller. Simply to put it, no one now have enough stocks for a big war as
Nobody was ready. Nobody was ready, and I really agree. Well, I mean, and I also understand that the way you say it is that some people should be ready because it's their job and responsibility, direct responsibility. and no one is ready. If the offensive in Ukraine was led by the American army, it would rely on the support of aviation, which would destroy the enemy's fortifications long before sending infantry. Instead, the Ukrainian military suffers from a lack of aviation and insufficient number of armored vehicles and artillery weapons, which leads to higher losses on the battlefield, according to American experts. Because there obviously is no way to Harry Potter you through the minefield. You have to literally go through it, so you will suffer a lot of losses. The experts claim, however, I quote, "The Americans would never have fought this way. They would have carpet-bombed entire minefields and lines of trenches long before sending even one soldier there." End of quote. Maybe those experts just did not notice that the Ukrainians simply do not have such an opportunity in order to effectively counterattack and actually get to the defensive lines that, by the way, have been properly dug and prepared and mined by Russians throughout the whole year. You need to have an advantage in artillery. Currently, however, Russia is much superior to Ukrainian artillery and, of course, in the number of military aircraft on the front line. The plans of NATO allies to increase the production of projectiles to 90,000 per month can significantly help Ukrainian army. So some non-military people claiming to be experts say that it is enough to pierce to go through the first one or two defensive lines and the whole Russian front line will just eventually fall. Is that true? Is that the case?
As I said, in such conditions that we see now in the Ukrainian front, Russians have a superiority in the air and artillery, so Ukrainians, as you quoted, just don't have the opportunity to act like Americans would do, because Americans have a much stronger army in every field, from space to aircraft to artillery and so on. So, but the question was, should Ukrainian command still order the offensive? The fact is they did. They saw all the disadvantages, but the problem is that war of attrition, if we see it for at least half a year now, it's not going well for the Ukraine. It's, as we said, it's not going well for Russia either, but it's much worse for Ukraine because Russia bombs all the Ukraine territories. The Ukrainians have millions of refugees. Economy is collapsing, so war of attrition not going well for them. So the only other options for them is to at least try to counter offense with the hope that this will bring a strategical change in the front line. For now on, they didn't achieve it, but because of the big reserves they are prepared, they still have a chance to break through. If this Ukrainian offensive will fail, so they coming back to the square one, to a war of attrition, and the question is how West will continue to support them after this. If they try and fail, so this will have some Western leaders maybe will have to do some reassessment how the war is going on. Should they try some negotiations, but now the offensive still did not end, so Ukrainians still have hope. So we will see how it will be, how it will end. But for now on, this is the main problem. The only hope is a successful offensive, because if not, it's only a war of attrition, and they definitely do not want it.
You said that the world and the Europe and the world, the collective West, so-called collective West, might reassess the situation and to find a different approach if Ukrainians fail on the battlefield I mean, this counteroffensive. What do you mean by that? To reassess? I mean, let me reinstate my question. What I wanted to know, if I would say that if the world would provide to General Zaluzhny what he wants and needs, the war in Ukraine will be won already. Am I right?
But this is a difference that we talk at the start of our conversations. Goals of Ukraine and goals of collective West in this war it's not the same thing. We can more or less be sure as that West and the USA doesn't want Ukraine to fail completely, to lose the war, but defeat of Russia, it's a very different thing. If Americans would go to war themselves, they have enough weapons to win this war, but for many reasons they simply don't want to transfer all these weapons to Ukraine. First of all, they need it for themselves for the next war with China, and second of all, they don't see a goal, complete defeat of Russia, because its consequences of this may be not comfortable for the West. Maybe disintegration of Russia, what will be with the nuclear weapons, etc. So maybe some leaders thinking about some meeting in the middle, some negotiations and so on. But the problem is, at least for now, Ukrainians don't want that. They want to get back all the territories from 1991. So there is a gap between what Ukraine wants and what collective West wants. And the only consequences of this is how much weapons they deliver. But we have to say, in many ways, Europe, at least physically, cannot give Ukraine all what they want. The only ones that can, it's USA. But USA don't give all of this mainly for political reasons, not for physical reasons, because as a global player, as I think of the big game, what will be with China, what will be with disintegration of Russia, and so on. So their main goal is to maintain this war in the borders of Ukraine, to make it not proliferate to Europe, to NATO, to any other countries. And the consequence of that they give Ukraine only enough to hold, but not enough to win. That's, of course, a problem of Ukraine, but they have to deal with them with this, because they were the ones who were attacked. Russia did not attack NATO, did not attack USA. They attacked only Ukraine. West helps, but not as it would help himself, let's say like that.
Okay, I understand that, but you mentioned that like the world and the collective West is afraid of that nuclear weapons to be in the wrong hands after the disintegration of Russia. But I can't really imagine worse hands now in Russia holding a nuclear club. So that reassessment of the situation might be also good for Ukraine. Like, let's finally help Ukraine win.
Theoretically speaking, yes, but disintegration of Russia, it's one of scenarios. Other scenario, if let's say Ukrainians gain more and more victories in the battlefield, theoretically speaking, he can push Putin into the corner, so he will make use of nuclear weapons because he doesn't have any other choice if he lost a conventional war. So we can think that Biden administration thinks about this scenario too. Maybe they simply don't want to push Putin into the corner too hard because he can push the button.
Yeah, I understand that. This is, I mean, but the, all right, but this is really a big theme and a big question. I would love to discuss it. But now the debates in the capitals of the West mainly go around how to end this war in such a way so for Ukraine to be secure for its future and not to be attacked by Russia in the next 3 or 5 years or so, and how much land Ukraine is going to or can regain. So please explain why the returning of territories is so important for Ukraine. I mean, the authorities keep on talking. I can understand that, but can you explain for our audience, maybe the people, some do not understand. Like in Ukraine, people want not just to return to some borders of 1991, but they want whole of the territory occupied by Russia back, including Crimea and all of the Donetsk and Lugansk and everything. Is that the right approach?
Borders of 1991, it's all they had before 2014, before the Russia occupied Crimea. Now they, we can call it Ukrainian propaganda, but it's a state of mind. They look at this as war of independence, war of liberation, so they want all their territories back because I don't think that Ukrainian leadership look at World War II scenario like Ukrainian army marching to Moscow, to Kremlin. That doesn't seem possible, but at least they want to have back all the territories that they think rightfully theirs. So that theoretically speaking, it's possible, but now we don't see it practical in the nearest future. So they have to reassess themselves. Maybe they will be forced by the West to meet in the middle, go to negotiation, because the West have very simple leverage on the Ukrainian leadership is weapon supply. They can simply supply less weapons, so Ukrainian victory simply would not be possible. So Ukrainian president, Ukrainian government will have to go to negotiation, but now they officially banned all the negotiation with Russia, but developments on the battlefield may be such that it will force on them the decisions that they don't want now. We'll see.
Yeah, we will see. The tension between European defense ministries and production companies resolves around the obvious issue. Even as orders start to pile in, the fear in the industry is that it could expand production only to find that when new facilities open in 3 or 5 years, there is no demand anymore. So governments have backtracked on plans before, and many European capitals have repeatedly failed to meet NATO targets on stockpiling or the pledge to spend at least 2% of gross domestic product on defense. In Israel, it is 5% of GDP. Is that right?
And recently, yes, it's around 4%, 5%, something like that. But the main difference, Israel is not in NATO. They have Israel has defensive relations with the United States, but it has to rely on itself in the war. So they don't that. Advantage and disadvantage of NATO. Advantage is that they have a collective umbrella. The disadvantage is that many countries think that the other guy will do the work and we just sit under the umbrella. Israel doesn't have this luxus. Israel is alone, so Israel has to
survive,
deal with by itself.
Yeah, but the Israel is at a constant war for half a century, for 50 years almost, isn't it? Isn't that true? What is it like to live in a country that is in a constant danger, in a constant challenge?
Israel has Israel government declared a state of emergency in 1948, and it has it since. So even juridically speaking, Israel always had a state of emergency, state of war. We can say that 3 generations of Israelis already got used to it, but if we talk about readiness of the armed forces, of the military industries and such that, Israel never had such thing as Europe after the end of the Cold War, that there will be no more wars. That was a brief period in the 90s when some of the Israelis thought that we can have peace with Palestinians and maybe there won't be war. But
Right. Well, I mean, I have friends living in Israel, so I know that this is a normal scene when you see a military guy or walking with weapons and rifles. It's normal. I mean, it happens every time, every day. Everyone gets in. My friends in Ukraine saying that they already got used to this also. And I wanted to ask you a personal, more or less personal question, if I might. You said that there was a brief period in history that Israelis believed that there might be a peace with Palestinians in any way. Do you think it is possible, in general or in particular? Is it even possible? There's a reason to think about it as about the possibility?
As we look at the situation now and we know what happened after the 90s, I don't see a real chance for peace in the nearest future, as we can see. Maybe someday, some distant future that we cannot even imagine now, maybe yes, but for practical purposes, I would say that in the nearest future, peace is not possible. Simply the war will take different forms. That maybe some all-out war, and after that period of more limited warfare, mainly terrorist acts, but peace, as we understand this word, I don't see it realistic in the nearest future.
Thank you for your answer, David. In a number of cases, Western politicians still give weapons to Ukraine, even against the opinion of their own military. Not because their military is hostile in any way to Ukraine, no. They just have their own standards for ensuring defense capability. It is their direct responsibility, after all. And they say, supporting Ukraine is a great idea, but first decide how you will replenish our own arsenals and equipment and fleet. So what is more effective, David? What do you think? To reduce your own defense capability and give out ammunition and weapons to Ukraine to win, or wait now and then fight future very possible Russian invasions?
That is the main problem that collective West have to deal. So the problem is that any expert can give an answer whatever he wants, but who decides is the political leaders in the USA and Europe. This is the biggest question. In Europe, many countries gave, if we're talking about percent, that gave a very large amount of their weapons, their stocks to Ukraine, and now they really came to the threshold that they really have to think what they will do tomorrow if the war comes. And the problem is that we don't see, at least for now, that military industries in the West also put on war state of mind and don't have such amount of long-time contracts that the production is just doesn't grow as fast as it should. And this is also the situation in USA. So at least for 1, 2, 3 years from now, I personally don't see that Western military industries will produce enough for such wars as it going.
3 years
No.
from now, and no production to the level necessary to fight possible future invasions? Like
Maybe in 3 years, yes, but it depends on how the Russian-Ukrainian war will go on. If it will stop tomorrow, so they can, so the Western countries may concentrate of putting back their stocks and so on. But if the war will go in such a way as it going now, so for now, West spends in Ukraine more ammunition that it produces. So all depends on how this war is going to end and when. Is it going to end? For now on, all that will be produced will go to Ukraine. They simply don't have enough for that and for this at the same time. That is the main problem now.
Let us now talk for more with somebody who is not even a somebody. ChatGPT answers our question. What risks do countries face when reducing their military arsenals? That is our question to ChatGPT, and the network answers. Reducing military stockpiles can have both potential benefits and risks for countries. While it may seem logical to aim for disarmament and a more peaceful world, certain risks need to be carefully considered. Here are some of the risks associated with reducing military stockpiles. Number 1. National security concerns. A significant reduction in military stockpiles can leave a country vulnerable to external threats. If a country faces aggression from other nations or non-state actors, it may find it difficult to defend itself adequately without sufficient military resources. I just love this maybe what ChatGPT uses, but do you think, David, that to lessen your stockpiles is a clever idea at all?
Sorry?
Do you think that to make your stockpiles less, to stop producing ammunition for any grounds, moral, whatever it is a good idea, is a clever idea? Isn't it a bit stupid?
It depends on the political situations. After the Cold War ended, many countries really believed that they simply would not need such amounts as they had produced in the Cold War. So for some, we can look also on Israel. Example, after Israel signed a peace agreement with Egypt, Israel also reduced its army, maybe not stockpiles, but the standing and reserve army. Now, for instance, Israel army has much less equipment, much less tanks. In the 80s, we had 3-4 times tanks more than we have now, because our main military threat was Egypt, and after peace agreement we thought we can reduce it, not like Europe did, that many countries reduced it almost to zero. But if a political situation changes, because big army and big military stockpiles cost a lot of money. It damages prosperity and economical advance, but now they see that European countries gone too far in this direction, so they now have to go back. The problem is it can be done swiftly and fast. So we have to wait if Europe will come back to big armies and the amount of stockpiles they had in the 80s. Even if European countries will decide on this, it will take them a great deal of money and many years to come back to situations they had.
But what about the great deal of freedom? I mean, of course, stockpiles costs money. Everything costs money, and stockpiles, military things are always expensive. But isn't that a bit more expensive when your nation loses its freedom? When a thug comes into your house, you have to be ready. So, I believe Israel knows that above all countries in the world, living constantly in a war.
Of course, it's a main problem. You have to take your risk. If you're in a hostile environment, it won't be wise to disarm yourself. But the problem is, Europe at least thought that they come to heaven now. They don't have any real threats, any real enemy after Russia is not longer big, strong Soviet Union, so now we can relax. Looking backward, we can say that they made a mistake, but we know this now.
It's a fact. It's a fact, yes.
Yeah. We know this only now.
Strategic imbalance is a point number 2. A unilateral reduction in military stockpiles by one country might lead to an imbalance of power in the whole region. This imbalance can potentially encourage aggressive actions from nations with larger stockpiles, as they may perceive an opportunity to gain an advantage. David, this is what happened to Russia, right? I mean, the failure of Russian aggression, which was about to take Kiev in 3 days and all these delusional plans, and instead they got bogged down in a war that Russia able to drag out but is not able to win. What was it all about? The general reason for the whole war from Russian side, what do you think as an expert is the reason for Putin to do this?
The reason was that Putin didn't want Ukraine to go in west. And we can put it in simple words, and it doesn't have to be formally in NATO, but we saw that Ukraine really going more and more west, because many in Russia, including Putin in particular, still see if not all of the Ukraine, but most of the Ukraine as their historical territories, they just simply wouldn't let go. This is our land, we won't give it to the West, so if we can make Ukrainians stay with us.
It's not.
By other means, so we will invade them, we will install a puppet government, and like this. The problem for Russians was their initial plan did not succeed. So they didn't prepare the army long war as it is going now. That's the reason the war looks as it looks, because Russians have another war in the mind when they prepare the forces and they prepare the plans. They prepare for one war and get altogether different war.
Exactly. Point number 3, made by ChatGPT, alliance commitments. Countries that are part of military alliances might face challenges if they unilaterally reduce their military stockpiles. Such actions could lead to concerns amongst their allies about the country's ability to fulfill its commitments in the alliance. David, what is the best alliance for Israel? Who's best Israel friend in the world? In terms of country, what do you think?
The main strategic So ally is of course USA, but Israel tries to build a connection with the countries in the region, and there was in 2020 there was Abraham Accords. So Israel signed a peace agreement with United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, and with Morocco. So now Israel even sells weapons to Emirates and Morocco. We have military cooperation. So, of course, these countries will, and not even USA, will fight with Israel in the next war. But it always good to have connections and on some levels and allies and some levels. But the difference between Israel and the European countries, as we said, NATO have the whole idea of NATO that all the countries will fight one for another. And Israel doesn't have this luxury. In any case, Israel will fight by itself, but in the fields it can find allies such as financial and military support, technological support from USA. Israel gets it, but not the obligation to fight with Israel in Israeli wars. This is the main difference between Israel and NATO countries.
A question from me, small question, but very important. Do you believe that Russia is a potential threat to Israel in any ways?
Well, no, Russia is not a threat, but it does provide some problems for Israel because of strong military cooperation developed in the recent years, and especially in this war, cooperation between Russia and Iran. Not only Russia receives UAS from Iran, it also transfers to Iran military equipment, military technologies. Of course, Israel would like that this will stop, but it won't. And also there are problems that Russia makes for Israel in Syria because of the Russian military group in Syria makes it more difficult for Israeli airstrike. But Israel tries to maintain the level of the conflicting with Russia. Officially, Israel does not see Russia as a direct military threat or as an enemy. We have economical ties and diplomatic ties, and more or less neutral state of mind, and the problems as they appear, try to solve them without military actions.
Right, more or less. Yep. Point number 6, arms race concerns. If multiple countries reduce their military stockpiles simultaneously, there might be concerns about creating a power vacuum that could lead to an arms race, as countries may seek to fill the void left by others. Number 7, technological advantages. Countries may be hesitant to reduce stockpiles of certain advanced weaponry, fearing that they may lose technological advantages over potential adversaries. Number 8, humanitarian crisis. While reducing military stockpiles is generally a positive goal, it is essential to consider the potential impact of international humanitarian crisis. If a country's military capabilities are significantly reduced, its ability to respond to humanitarian disasters and crises may also be affected. Once again, I just love this may and maybe of ChatGPT, but of course it does. Of course, it reduces the military potential of the countries. But the answer maybe is the technology, the high tech, which Israel, I know, uses all the time. The technicians, one of the best in the world. Maybe high tech is the answer to arm race. Lesser but a more powerful weapon?
It depends on the character of war that every country see in the potential scenarios. For instance, this current Russian-Ukrainian war teaches us once more a lesson that this is a war not of quality but of quantities. Ukrainians received very superior technology, military technology from the West, SIMs and etc. But we see the main problem is quantity. So not all the problems can be solved with high technology. Big wars demands large quantities of weapons without regard to the quality.
Thank you for your answer. Number 9, and the last point from ChatGPT, nuclear disarmament challenges. In the case of nuclear weapons, disarmament can be particularly complex due to issues of verification, trust, and the potential for rogue actors acquiring nuclear capabilities. It's important to note that despite these risks, there are also potential benefits to reducing military stockpiles, thinks ChatGPT, including cost savings, reduced tension, improved international cooperation, and increased focus on addressing social and economic challenges. Countries must carefully assess the balance between these risks and benefits while considering the unique geopolitical context and security needs. Diplomacy, transparency, and international cooperation plays a crucial role in managing the risks associated with military reduction efforts. I want to ask another question, and the last question for today. David, in general, do you think that our Ukrainian generals and military authorities are so clever, or just Russian authorities and generals are so stupid?
I would say that not that and not this. The problem of Russia in this war is not the generals are stupid, because, as I said, they prepared all the economy, all the military for just another kind of war. And when the country prepares for one war and gets another, they have many problems, as we see. But Ukraine, of course, we saw many. I don't know if use the word great. We have a good combat achievements by the Ukrainian army, but I don't think that every Ukrainian general is a genius. Of course, there is a General Zaluzhny, but they don't have 10,000s of General Zaluzhnys. And one of the problems, because of the war, they have to triple the army. Right. That means they need 3 times more commanders. And one cannot say that all these new commanders will be military geniuses. So the Ukrainian army also has this amount of military stupidity, but they're fighting for the country, for their freedom, and they have more motivation. They have Western help that compensate for all the mistakes, cons that every military has. I was in the Israeli military. They had the fair share of stupid officers, stupid generals. Not everyone is genius. The problem is they have to fight with what they have. They don't have another generals. They don't have another army. They have to fight with what they have now in hand.
Indeed, indeed. But I mean, there's only one thing for me to add to it. If Ukrainian army would have 10,000 Valery Zaluzhnys, I don't think that Russia would stand a chance. And I don't think personally that the war would even break out. I think that the war will be ended by now. But this is just my speculation on this, you know, because I'm an admirer. Yes, I have to admit that. So thank you very much, David, for your time and for your expertise. We hope to see you soon with us. Thank you. It was Israeli military expert, Mr. David Handelman, and for now, I must say my goodbyes. I'm Henry Keane, and it was my show, Talk for More. If you liked the episode, press like button. If you didn't like it, tell us why in the comments below, and ring the bell. Press that bell sign and be the first to see the most up-to-date information. Subscribe to the Gaze platform on YouTube and our social networks. Keep in touch. We talk for more soon.